Hi folks, Florida Man here, with Basics of Italy, Antipasto. In the last Basics of Italy video, I suggested some diplomatic outreach to engage in early on and keys to how you think about this game as Italy. In this video, I'll be going over different ways to open depending on how those early efforts went. Italy's most important early relationship is usually with Austria, so I will start there. If Austria is interested in working with you, or you at least have a minimal level of trust with Austria, you might find it's good to empower the Austrian player by agreeing to vacate Venice in spring 1901. This empowers Austria because it means he can move Trieste to Albania without worrying that they'll have to come back and cover Trieste. It creates very little risk to you as Italy because you can move Venice to Piedmont or Tuscany, and if you also moved Rome to Apulia or held Rome in place, you'll be able to support yourself back into Venice in the fall. That might not be possible if Austria moved, say, Trieste to Venice and Vienna to Trieste, so they could support themselves holding in Venice, but if Austria has decided in spring 1901 to make such a determined and committed move against you, ignoring the defense of Austria's centers against Russia and Turkey, losing Venice is frankly the least of your problems. Austria going down early is very rarely good for Italy. Austria is typically your shield against Russian and Turkish invasion, and that's why I favor making Austria reasonably secure against the threat of Italian invasion. If Austria does choose to walk into Venice, there are good odds that you'll either have warning from one of Austria's other neighbors, if you've done your job of communicating properly and established relationships with the other relevant powers, or you'll be aided in fighting Austria off by the fact that both Turkey and Russia will quickly move against Austria because Austria has not properly defended against them. If they are not naturally inclined to do so, because the Austrian has managed to persuade them that letting Austria live for a moment is in their interests, you should be able to persuade them by appealing to their real self-interest, which is definitely enhanced by taking Austria out, given that if Austria actually did absorb Italy, it would be a threat to both of them. Anyway, hopefully your relationship with Austria is better than what I've been describing. If you're working with Austria, and perhaps Germany and Turkey and perhaps Russia, you should be moving in an even more overtly helpful way for Austria, if Austria consents. For the Lepanto, you move to the Ionian, convoy an army to Tunis. You could disguise that by moving to the Tyrrhenian Sea and convoying to Tunis through there instead, but the fact that you're convoying at all will give away that a Lepanto is probably happening to a perceptive Turkish player, and you might tick off the French player by going to the Tyrrhenian Sea. Moving to the Tyrrhenian Sea has the additional downside of taking tempo away from your attack on Turkey, because you will still need to push a unit through the Ionian Sea in order to get to the Aegean Sea and or the East Mediterranean, spaces you will ideally possess in order to carry out the objective of the Lepanto, which is convoying into Smyrna or Syria or, if you're really lucky somehow, Constantinople. If Austria trusts you, you might get to do even more to defeat the enemies to the east. You might get to move through Trieste or Tyrolia and thereby get your second army involved in the fight. It doesn't happen often, but when it does, it significantly increases the forces available to the Austrian-Italian alliance on the front lines, and it can frequently get you a second build in 1901, which Italy sorely needs and which is usually impossible. I think that if Italy and Austria are really working together, hand in hand, one of the best openings they could make is Trieste to Albania, Budapest supports Vienna to Galicia, Venice to Trieste. You can follow that up by supporting Trieste into Serbia, and or taking Greece, along with possibly taking Romania or bouncing Russia out of Romania. This opening gives the Austrian-Italian alliance a lot of options. If Austria prefers not to let you walk into Trieste, understandably, but Austria and Germany are open to you moving into Tyrolia, you can move through Bohemia and help launch an early attack on Russia. It's a very unorthodox moveset, but there's no reason why it can't work. If you don't have a good relationship with Austria, or you don't want to help Austria defeat the Turks and Russians, you don't have to actually involve yourself in the Eastern Sphere early on. That is kind of the privilege of Italy being outside of either of the major spheres of conflict. You should probably keep an army in Venice if you don't trust Austria, although it is my experience that Italy stabbing Austria in 1901 is more common than the reverse, because Austria has a lot of worries of his own. But there's no sense in letting your guard down for no return at all. If you're not working with Austria, you may want to consider attacking Austria, although that's not my usual recommendation, for reasons I've mentioned before. One simple but effective method is moving Venice to Trieste and Rome to Venice, which is a pretty perfect spring stab if you actually know for a fact that Austria is not defending Trieste at all. If you don't have divine insight into that, some other good recommendations I've seen are Venice to Piedmont and Rome to Venice, which can look like you might be going after France, but which you can then slide east in the fall to end up in Trieste and Venice, or alternatively, Venice to Tyrolia and Rome to Venice, which allows you to support yourself into Trieste and probably force it in the fall, but has the disadvantage of being a lot more blatant as an attack on Austria and also probably ticking Germany off by occupying Tyrolia, which was probably a DMZ between you two. Of course, it goes without saying that I would go for Austria as Italy only if I have a very strong relationship with Russia and maybe Turkey as well, although I think the Italian-Turkish alliance is one of the most untenable alliances on the map long term. So if you go after Austria, you are probably going for a winter-green, a Russian-Italian alliance. Alternatively, if you're not involving yourself in the East early on, you're almost certainly going for France. What that usually means is Italy goes for Piedmont and maybe the Tyrrhenian Sea. If you do that, the downside is you probably don't gain any French centers in 1901 unless Germany moves into Burgundy and supports you into Marseille. But you do tip off France that you're an enemy, so France is almost certain to build a fleet to send against you if they're able, and France will probably be at least moving to defend against you to the best of their ability. So the trade-off there is between making an ambiguous set of moves that don't advance you at all, versus making very definitely hostile moves that might only be a small step toward fighting your opponent. That's a trade-off you'll have to make based on the specifics of the board you're playing on. You may want to demonstrate hostility toward France in order to gain commitment from England and/or Germany to an anti-French war, or you may want to be the one who waits to see if your prospective allies, who are frankly a little less vulnerable than you to being immediately crushed by France, are willing to strike the first blow. I can't make that call for you, it's going to be different for every game. Finally, a few words about division of spoils, because this is important. As Italy, I think it's usually critical that you eliminate either France or Turkey early on, so you gain a measure of security, but it's just as important to make sure you get some tangible reward for your struggle. Italy is in danger of being cut out of these rewards. If France is your first opponent, you should negotiate to get at least Spain and Marseille for your troubles. Those centers will make you fairly strong relative to what you were. You can maybe also make a play for, or negotiate for, Portugal, depending on what England and Germany are looking at doing in the West, but getting Marseille and Spain should typically be fairly straightforward for the average Italy. If Turkey is your first opponent, ideally you negotiate for all the Turkish home centers, or something along those lines. Maybe you get Greece and one or two Turkish centers. But the reason why I say it's ideal to get all the Turkish home centers is because if your ally is Austria, those Turkish centers will be highly defensible for you indefinitely, even if Austria chooses to turn on you. The Turkish position is well known by most players as very defensible, whereas Greece would be fairly easy to capture unless 2 or 3 units are devoted to defending it, and the same is true of Bulgaria. Hopefully Austria will agree with your assessment and understand that giving you the Turkish home centers and themselves getting the Greek and Bulgarian centers is a good way of allowing you both to coexist and demilitarize the shared border regions. If Austria is your first target, you should negotiate with Russia to make sure you get Trieste and Serbia, try to negotiate with Austria or Turkey so you can get Greece, and also try to get a unit into Albania. It goes without saying that you also need to keep hold of the Ionian Sea. This is probably going to be a difficult situation to navigate, but you need to secure the centers and spaces I've just described, because if you're attacking Austria, you probably need to prepare to eliminate Turkey immediately after, if possible. And you need to get Russia on your side and make it look like it would be much easier to fight Turkey than you. You may have to promise Russia the moon in order to secure Russian promises to side with you over Turkey. In this situation, I think it's okay to do that. Once Turkey is weakened and can be finished off reasonably easily, you will hopefully have the capacity to renegotiate, if necessary. If you try to work with Turkey instead of Russia, the usual outcome is that you will get stabbed. Turkey has an almost unbreakable corner position, and eventually your position in the center will be attacked from the north or the west. At that point, Turkey will probably get to stab you and take most of your centers. So, as Italy, I prefer not to work with Turkey very long, and not to work with Turkey at all if I have the choice. I hope this helps further flesh out the early game strategy. The next video will delve further into next steps after defeating one of your early neighbors. I hope you liked this video, and if so, I hope you'll like, subscribe, and check out more of my channel's content. I'm looking forward to more videos in this series myself, but looking to the future, please comment below about which country you'd like to see me discuss next. Until next time, Florida Man, out.